Hello there. On behalf of CISCRIP and the Philadelphia-based planning team, I have the pleasure of welcoming you to Aware for All. My name is Hope Venturcelli, and I am the Manager of Events and Community Engagement at CISCRIP. CISCRIP is a nonprofit organization that educates the public about clinical research. We do not conduct trials or recruit for trials, but we believe that everyone should have the information they need to be informed about clinical research. To make sure that this program is a meaningful educational experience for you, we ask for your feedback. We will have some polls throughout the program, and these questions will also be your raffle ticket at the end of the program. If you have any questions throughout the event, please shoot us a message in the chat box. Our team will be monitoring the chat and will bring up any questions you may have during the Q&A portion. Now let's look at why we are here today. Our ability to live long, healthy lives is due in large part to advances in medical treatments, advances that would not have been possible without the participation of volunteers in clinical trials. This past year, over 2 million people took part in about 80,000 clinical research trials of drugs and procedures that treat, detect, and prevent disease and health problems. I want to also take this moment to acknowledge any of our audience members who have participated in clinical research. We thank you for your important contribution to advance medical science and health for all of us. At the close of our program, we would like to recognize all study volunteers, or as we like to call them, medical heroes, with a special ceremony. CISCRIP was honored to collaborate on this important program with over 350 community and research organizations. These groups helped to spread the word about the AWARE program, expanded our reach, and helped contact thousands of people in the Philadelphia area to raise awareness about clinical research. You can visit many of these groups in our new interactive virtual health fair. I would also like to take a moment to recognize our planning team. For the past few months, these dedicated individuals have helped to organize today's virtual event. Without your help and support, this program would not have been possible. I also wanted to take a minute to recognize the CISCRIP team who has worked tirelessly to ensure that today's program is meaningful and educational. I'm so proud to be part of such an hardworking team. We would now like to thank our generous Aware for All sponsors, all of whom contributed funds and support to make this program free and accessible to all. A very special thank you to the Aware Industry Consortium, Biogen, Boston Scientific, CSL Behring, AMD Serrano, IQVIA, Janssen, Merck, Otsuka, Pfizer, and WCG for providing support and to bring this educational program to 5 cities this year. To our national sponsor, the Allergy and Asthma Network, and our local sponsors, Lazarus Cancer Foundation, Greenfire, and the Fox Chase Cancer Center. Thank you for all of your continued support. It is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Edith Peterson Mitchell, Clinical Professor of Medicine and Medical Oncology, as well as the Director of the Center to Eliminate Cancer Disparities, Associate Director of Diversity Affairs at Sidney Kimmel Cancer Center at Jefferson, and the 116th President of the National Medical Association, Brigadier General, retired United States Air Force, and the first woman physician ever promoted to this rank in the history of the U.S. Air Force.
Thank you, Hope, for the introduction. I really appreciate. And on behalf of the Sidney Kimmel Cancer Center at Jefferson and Jefferson Health System, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to collaborate and to work together because it's so important. And I would like to thank the audience for participating today also, because it's so important. We all have to work together. And thanks again for the opportunity to participate again today. So people often ask me, what's your story? And how did you become interested in medicine and in clinical research? Well, it's really through family support, continuous hard work, and having great mentors. So it's been a long stride, but one that I would quickly do again if I had another opportunity. My earliest memories were actually on our family farm located near Memphis in Western Tennessee. And it was really very interesting. My father took over the operations of his grandfather's farm when I was 1 month old. My great-grandfather's farm was in disrepair. all of the children, or most of the children, had moved to Gary and Chicago and Detroit for the industries. And I think it's still to my mother's chagrin that my dad agreed to take over his grandfather's farm. I was 1 month old. So my older siblings were in school. My mother and father were working to repair the farm. And my great grandparents, who were in their 80s, were my babysitter. So I had fun in the kitchen. My great grandmother was an outstanding cook. So my earliest memories were in the kitchen with my great grandmother, or walking across the farm with my great grandfather. My great grandfather became ill when I was 3, and family, friends, neighbors all made a schedule of who was going to be there to assist in his medical care, because I overheard the adults say, well, you can't take him to the hospital because Black patients don't get treated right in the hospital. And there's separate areas of the hospital, and they let the Black patients just lay out on stretchers and nobody does anything for them. So they made the schedule, and there was a doctor, the only Black doctor, probably in a 30-mile radius, who would come by and make house calls. On the first day that Dr. Logan came by the house to see my great grandpa, I was 3 years old, mind you. And when he left, I said to Pa, when I grow up, I'm going to be a doctor just like Dr. Logan, and I'll make sure you get the right care. And he patted me on the head, and I remember this so vividly. Baby, you can be whatever you want to be, but you've got to work hard, you've got to study hard, and you can be that doctor. So I went to first grade to be a doctor, and I've never looked back. My first opportunities for research were after my sophomore year in high school. And mind you, I was a straight A student. And I had a scholarship from the National Science Foundation for high school students for summer study. And of course, St. Jude Children's Cancer Hospital was a one building then. And I got to spend time at St. Jude's. So that introduced me to research. Graduated from high school, went to college at Tennessee State University, where I was able to do research for really all my 4 years. I started in this doctor's office as a typist. And by the end of my first year, I was in the laboratory and just washing glassware, whatever needed to be done. And that doctor, Dr. Andrew Bond, kept me working. And as I learned more, I grew into research, and I did research with him the entire 4 years of college. Went on to medical school, loved medical school, and was very aggressive. Did research while I was in medical school, and then on to my residency, my fellowship, and study. I went to the Air Force, where I still did research. And while I was supposed to pay back 2 years to the Air Force for my scholarship, 2 years turned into 36. I became a commander, state air surgeon, and assistant adjutant general. And it turned into 36 years, and promotion to brigadier general. And I was the first woman physician ever promoted to that rank. So I'm really thankful for my mentors who included my family, my siblings, my parents, and of course, my great-grandfather, and others that opened doors for me, not only provided opportunities, but they opened doors for me and allowed me to achieve success. And I'm doing research now on community engagement. And with community engagement, I've been able to work with Aware for All for many years. And with community engagement, I'm trying to work with individuals who have socioeconomic issues, racial and ethnic issues that allow individuals to be ostracized in medicine and perhaps don't receive either proper care or participate in research because for especially African Americans, the Tuskegee story has really diminished trust in the healthcare institutions. But we've got to make sure that individuals get the right treatment for the right problem at the right time, and therefore giving greater opportunities. So the opportunity for cancer, for clinical trials, community engagement, and other areas of research really is very important. And my hope is that I can tell Pa, and I still talk to him periodically, that I'm still working on it and that we can work together. So with everybody working together, that means the community, the healthcare institutions, and all of us together making sure that clinical trials reach the appropriate population. And say that we are moving ahead, especially in terms of disease processes that are more frequently seen in the African American and other minority populations, those disease processes where the disease is at a higher incidence rate, at a higher death rate or mortality rate, and occurs at a younger age. So disease processes such as hypertension, diabetes, heart and lung disease, stroke, and many cancers. All of these occur at a higher incidence rate, a higher mortality or death rate, and at younger ages in the African American population, as well as other minority and socially deprived or socioeconomically deprived individuals. And therefore, we need to understand the disease processes, the contributions of social determinants of health, such as lack of access to care, such as the air quality, lack of insurance, and other social determinants of health that allow for these disease processes to occur more frequently in certain communities and in certain racial and ethnic groups. We all recognize that Dr. Martin Luther King said that of all of the disparities and inequality, the disparities in healthcare were the greatest inequality and the most inhumane. And then we have Congressman John Lewis saying, good trouble. So we've all got to get together and face these disparities, address the disparities, and not just address them, we've got to get rid of them so that we can say we're doing something with good trouble. So with that, I encourage individuals, find out about clinical trials, get second opinions if you need about your medical care, but make sure that you find the correct clinical trials so that you and your family and friends and everybody are getting the best treatment at the right time, the right disease process treatments, and we can say we're making good trouble and getting rid of disparities in healthcare. So thank you very much. It is an honor and a privilege for me to be here today, and I hope everyone gets involved and make sure that you take this back to your community. Community engagement is so important. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mitchell, for that wonderful introduction to our program. In just a moment, I'll turn it over to Dr. Jonathan Jackson, who will provide an overview about clinical research. Right after that, we will have an intro to Tai Chi demonstration from Salome Wellness, and after that, we will host a panel discussion with study volunteers and research professionals, sharing information about their roles in the clinical research process. We encourage you to send in questions through our chat box or by emailing awareforall@syscript.org. We'll open for a Q&A directly following the panel discussion. Finally, I will turn it back over to our guest from Salome Wellness, who will lead us in a mindful meditation before we conclude with our Medical Hero ceremony. Let's get started. A copy of our overview presentation called What Clinical Research Means to You is included in our digital handbook. There's a link in our resource center right beneath the media player to download a copy and follow along. We will also send a link to view right after the event. This is a wonderful educational tool, and I encourage you to read it after the program and share it with your friends and family. It is my sincere pleasure to turn it over to Dr. Jonathan Jackson, founder and executive director of the Community Access, Recruitment, and Engagement Research Center at Massachusetts General Hospital and instructor of neurology at Harvard Medical School.
Right. Thank you, Hope. I'd also like to welcome you to the Aware for All Clinical Research Education event. We are thrilled that so many of you are joining us to learn about clinical research. I'd like to start with a few questions. Have you ever taken an allergy medicine? Have you ever given your child a pain reliever? Perhaps you have a friend or family member who's a cancer survivor. If so, you can thank clinical research volunteers. All around the world, people are living longer, healthier lives because people they've never met volunteered to take part in clinical research studies. And those studies helped find ways to prevent, treat, and even cure certain medical conditions. We like to call these volunteers medical heroes. Most people don't understand what clinical research is about. Some people are afraid. They may think that clinical research volunteers are treated like guinea pigs, or they've heard stories about clinical trials that have gone wrong, or they still remember past abuses when there were no protections in place for clinical research volunteers. That's why SysScript and the organizations involved in this program believe in education before participation. We think the more people understand about the clinical research process, the more they'll appreciate those who volunteer to participate in clinical research. What we learn from clinical research studies improves public health. And it all starts with these questions. How does a disease progress, and how can it be prevented? How well does a new drug work or not work? Is there a better way to treat a disease? How do genes affect illness? Does where people live change their health? Researchers can only answer these questions with the help of clinical research volunteers. What is a clinical trial? It's a carefully designed study where researchers ask volunteers to do something like take a new drug or treatment so they can answer a specific medical question. Is a treatment safe? Does it improve a certain medical condition? Does it have side effects? How much should people take? Is it any better than medicines that are already available? Because researchers are always studying new investigational treatments, there are risks to participating in a clinical trial. But in all cases, something is learned from clinical research studies that helps inform medical knowledge and improves public health. It's important to understand that being in a clinical trial is not the same as going to your doctor for care. When you go to your doctor, she'll give you a treatment that has already been tested and approved by the government. This is called routine or standard of care. This is the care we know works for most people. This is the care that you would get if you go to your doctor for regular appointments or if you had a health problem. You can't fully understand something by studying just one group of people. For many years, most clinical trials were done on white men only. This meant that groups such as African Americans, women, or other minorities were not included. But today, clinical trials welcome the participation of all people, and those clinical trials are closely monitored for their safe and ethical treatment of volunteers. We know that being male or female, young or old, factors related to race and ethnicity all affect the way that people respond to disease and treatments. For example, Alzheimer's disease happens twice as often in women than men. Type 2 diabetes and asthma are more common in African Americans. Hispanics, Asian, and white women are more likely to develop osteoporosis. Children respond to drugs differently than adults. That's why scientists need all different types of people to volunteer for research. The more diverse the participants in clinical trials are, the more researchers learn about the different ways that people respond to medical treatments. It is essential that diverse communities are adequately represented in clinical trials in order to understand disease and how to treat it among each unique population. Some people remember past abuses like the US public health study of syphilis in Tuskegee, Alabama, in which treatment was withheld from African American men for many years, or the study of Henrietta Lacks and what are now known as HeLa cells, one of the most commonly used cell lines in scientific research. These studies gathered information about patients without their consent and remuneration for their participation. People wonder if this could happen today. The answer to that? It's not likely. Federal guidelines and ethical practices are in place to monitor the safety and to protect the rights of study volunteers. Today, the public and professionals are more aware than ever of the need to have diverse populations in clinical research, and we are taking steps to break down participation barriers, improve diversity, and pave the way to a healthier future for everyone. Several studies have shown that underrepresented minority populations consistently demonstrate an equal or higher willingness to participate in clinical research studies than do their white counterparts. Individuals within these communities have said that lack of access to clinical trials is the primary reason why they don't participate. This includes outreach and communications that fail to reach them, health and research professionals not asking them to participate, clinical trials that are too far away, and participation requirements that are too difficult to follow. If we work together, we can solve these problems and make clinical trials far more accessible. Let's talk a bit about the different phases of a study and how long it typically takes to advance a new therapy. During phase 1 studies, a drug is tested for the first time with a very small number of volunteers, and often these are healthy volunteers. The goal of these clinical trials is to learn what is a safe dose and how does it work in the body? Is it harmful? In phase 2 studies, researchers begin to understand how well a drug works and if it is safe for patients who have a specific disease or condition. Like phase 1, safety is still the main goal. Phase 2 studies look to answer such basic questions as how much should people take and what are the usual side effects. Only about 1/3 of drugs that enter clinical testing ever successfully complete phase 2 and progress to larger groups of patients like phase 3 studies. At this stage, researchers may check the drug's safety and how well it works in different groups of patients. The trial may also compare the new drug with an already approved drug. Phase 4 studies happen after a treatment has been approved by the Food and Drug Administration. This usually involves a very large number of patients. Phase 4 studies look at real-world experience and check to see if the drug works well over a long time. The clinical research process from phase 1 to 3 takes 7 or more years. You've probably heard a lot in the news lately about the development of vaccines and treatments for COVID-19. Vaccines and treatments for infectious diseases usually take 9 or 10 years to develop. This seems like a long time, but it's necessary for understanding the real effects of a new therapy and determining whether it's safe and effective at specific dosage levels. The clinical trial process for COVID-19 treatments and vaccines is moving at a much faster pace and may produce promising therapies within a few years. Some treatments and vaccines have a head start because they are based on research that was conducted for viruses that are similar to COVID-19. The pandemic has mobilized much higher levels of coordination between companies and government agencies, which helps speed up the process. In the educational handbook that you will be receiving, you'll find a number of resources about COVID-19 studies and new therapies in development. Clinical trials can be sponsored by the government, academic medical centers, pharmaceutical companies, biotechnology companies, or medical device companies. Research involves a lot of people who do different things. Like members of a sports team, clinical trials have coaches, players, and officials, and each person has an important role to play. The principal investigator is like the head coach of a team. He or she is responsible for organizing and leading the study, as well as recording and studying the data. The PI also directs the team. Like a head coach, the principal investigator follows a playbook, which is called the study protocol. The protocol is a set of instructions that everyone in the game must follow. It's the plan for how the study will be carried out. The research staff members are like assistant coaches who help the principal investigator. The clinical research coordinator handles the day-to-day activity at the research site. He or she has easy access to the principal investigator and is the main contact for volunteers. If you have questions about the trial or your health, ask the coordinator. Referees help protect the safety of volunteers by making sure that teams follow the rules. The referees review the study before it starts. The referees keep you safe and give you all the information. The number and type of referees involved in a trial depends on the research being conducted. Every clinical trial is reviewed, approved, and watched over by an independent local committee called an Institutional Review Board, or IRB. It's the law. The IRB makes sure a trial is ethical and fair, and that there is not too much risk for volunteers. During the trial, researchers must let the IRB know if there are any changes in the study plan, or if volunteers experience serious injuries or side effects. The IRB can end a trial if it feels that volunteers are not safe. Referees from the federal government are also involved. The Food and Drug Administration reviews studies, inspects research centers, and monitors research groups to make sure they are following federal guidelines. The FDA have the final say in whether or not a treatment is approved. Now let's talk about the most important members of the team, the study volunteers. Volunteers are like the players on the field. Without them, clinical research can't happen. We need all different types of people to participate in clinical research. You don't even need to be sick. A lot of research involves healthy volunteers. Your friends and family may provide you with a support system while you're taking part in a study. It is good to talk to your friends and family about the clinical trial. They can help you come up with questions to ask your doctor. They can also support you while you're participating. In the end, it is your job to make the final decision if you will participate in the study. Everyone has the chance to participate in research. You just have to find the clinical trial that is right for you. Just like a football game, there are rules and not everyone can be on the field at the same time. The research team has a list of requirements for the participants, just like the coaching staff drafts players. Both the coaches and the players have to know the game and agree to work together. Let's talk about eligibility first. A 10-year-old would never be allowed to play on a pro football team, right? Why? Because it would be too dangerous. Just like in sports, clinical trials have eligibility criteria. These are guidelines that indicate who can or can't be in the study. Eligibility criteria ensure that the clinical trial is studying the right people under the right conditions. If you're considering a trial, you must be honest with researchers about your health. Lying or hiding information to get into a trial can endanger your safety and ruin the study. Okay, let's assume the coaches say you're eligible to play. The next question to ask yourself is, do I choose to play? You cannot say whether or not you want to participate without understanding the rules of the game. What are your responsibilities as a player? How long will the game last? What are the risks and benefits of playing? The informed consent process is designed to answer all these questions and is required by the FDA and IRB. This is one of the most important parts of research, and it's a term you're going to hear a lot. Before any volunteer can participate in a trial, he or she must read, understand, and sign the informed consent form. This is a long form that lists your rights as a volunteer. It includes details about the clinical trial. It describes your role as a volunteer and any procedures or tests you'll need to have. It's going to warn you about any known or unknown side effects of the study drug. It describes the benefits of participating in the trial. By signing the form, you're saying that you understand the clinical trial and are agreeing to follow the protocol. The informed consent form is a complex document. The study staff should go through it carefully with you and answer all of your questions. You should never feel rushed or pressured to sign the form. It's important to note that the IRB can ask the researcher to translate the informed consent form into multiple languages that study volunteers prefer to speak. As a research volunteer, you have rights. You have the right to understand the purpose, benefits, risks, and side effects of the clinical trial. You have the right to ask any questions and discuss any concerns with the research staff at any time during the trial. And you have the right to full, complete, and clear answers. Most importantly, you have the right to quit the trial at any time for any reason. You are a volunteer and are free to leave the clinical trial if you choose to. The research staff will help you do this safely. You've heard a lot about clinical trials and your rights and responsibilities as a volunteer. Deciding to take part in a clinical trial is a personal decision. What's right for a family or friend may not be right for you. I'd like to talk about some of the risks and benefits you should consider. Scientists set up their studies so that the research will be fair. They also want the research to be accurate and unbiased. In other words, they don't want their own ideas about what they think should happen in a trial to influence the results. To set up fair studies, volunteers may be split into different groups. This is usually done by chance using a computer program and is similar to a coin toss. The researcher and the volunteer do not get to decide which group the volunteer will be in. This is called a randomized study. Sometimes researchers will go a step further and they will blind a study. That means that the volunteer and the researcher both do not know which treatment the volunteer is receiving. In some trials, researchers will use a placebo. A placebo looks like medicine but has no medicine in it. Sometimes the placebo is referred to as a sugar pill. What's interesting is that even though the placebo has no medicine in it, there are times when people who are taking a placebo improve or feel better during a trial. This is called the placebo effect. As a clinical research volunteer, even if you are on a placebo, you will be closely monitored. Deciding whether or not to participate in a clinical trial is an important personal decision. Here are some reasons why people say they get involved in clinical trials. They get access to brand new therapies that are not yet available on the market. They get to advance science and help others with their condition. And the research staff will have a chance to observe your health very closely. So let's talk briefly about compensation. Some, but not all, clinical trials will pay for volunteers' travel costs and pay you for your time and commitment. The amounts vary pretty widely. Getting paid should never be your only reason for volunteering. All research involves risks. There could be physical risks. You may not get better. You may even get worse, or you may be uncomfortable. There's emotional risk. The protocol can be demanding and participation might be stressful. There could be financial risk. There may be out-of-pocket expenses such as childcare or missing work. And then there's privacy and confidentiality risk. When you agree to participate in research, you are giving permission for researchers to collect information about you. Researchers must follow rules that protect your privacy and your information. Be sure to let all your doctors know that you're in a clinical trial and have a contact number ready to reach the research staff in case of an emergency. Volunteering takes time and effort. You can work with the study staff to try to accommodate your schedule. Even if you want to continue to participate, your doctor, the referees, or the company making the new drug could stop the study. Many volunteers drop out of studies because they don't fully understand what they were signing up for. So do your homework. Learn about the clinical trial and ask questions. Read all the information provided by the study staff. You may even go online to learn about the potential treatment that's being studied. Take your time. There's absolutely nothing wrong with asking a researcher to slow down or explain something further. Ask questions. Talk about your concerns with the study staff, your doctor, your friends, your family. Bring a friend or family member to study visits so they can ask questions too. Try recording your visits or take notes so you can refer to the information later on and follow up with questions as needed. If you decide to join a study, you should feel confident that you have made an informed choice. You should feel comfortable that the clinical trial staff will support you and answer all of your questions. Here's a handy way to think about it at every step. You start by becoming aware of a clinical trial. You think you're interested, so you discuss it with your doctor. If you're still interested, you need to know all the details. So you talk to the research staff and find out whether you're eligible. If it sounds like something that's right for you, you can choose to sign the informed consent form. But even while you're taking part in the study, continue to ask questions and decide whether you choose to complete the clinical trial or not. Informed consent is an ongoing process, not a single event. Remember, today's event is an important first step. If you're interested in learning more, I'd suggest starting a conversation with your doctor. You can also get information from local research centers, disease advocacy groups, medical journals, and conferences. There are also a number of websites devoted to clinical trials. Many patient advocacy groups, academic institutions, and research centers have information on clinical trials on their websites. Searchclinicaltrials.org and researchmatch.org offer free services to learn about clinical trials and connect with study teams. Clinicaltrials.gov is a site maintained by the National Institutes of Health, or NIH, that includes trial enrollment information. CenterWatch.com lists trials that are enrolling volunteers. In addition, many pharmaceutical and biotechnology companies list active trials on their websites. You can also call 617-725-2750. SysScript provides a free search service designed to help patients find trials that might be right for them. Or you may talk to your doctor, research site, friends, and family to help find resources for you. Research volunteers truly are medical heroes, without whom medical science could not move forward. I'd like to sincerely thank you for taking time today to learn about the clinical research process. And I strongly encourage you to share what you've learned with your friends, family, and people throughout your community. On behalf of all of us, I'd like to say thanks to the millions of people who give the gift of participation in clinical trials each year, and to the rest of us who admire them for doing so.
So let's see. So Dr. Jackson, thank you so much. That was fantastic. We appreciate your time today. One of the questions that we got in was, how do you involve patients in the study design? Do you have anything that you can kind of relay to our audience about that?
Yeah, so it turns out that there's lots of ways to involve patients in the study design of a research trial. There are possibilities of joining a community advisory board, where these are individuals who are often consulted ahead of a study beginning to enroll participants, and they get to weigh in on things like how much people are paid, how frequent visits are, things of that nature. You can also be part of an institutional review board. Like we said in the presentation, an IRB is required to sign off on every single research study that ever happens. And each IRB needs somebody from the community. So somebody who doesn't necessarily have fancy degrees, somebody who's not necessarily very well-versed in clinical research. They need to be aware and understand how a study is designed and what those risks are. So it's not just about volunteering to be a participant in research study. You also have many, many opportunities to really help shape the way that clinical research occurs in your community. So I would recommend joining a community advisory board, or potentially joining an institutional review board if that's possible.
Fantastic. Yeah. And I think you were talking a lot before about talking to all the people in your life if you're considering getting involved with clinical study. But how would you determine if a clinical trial is right for you? What's some advice that you might be able to share with our audience?
Yeah, so I think that the first thing that you need to know and understand within yourself is, do I feel comfortable with this study? Do I have any lingering questions about what participation looks like, what questions they're answering, what information I'm going to get back, what I'm supposed to be doing with my time? I would say that if you have any lingering questions or any lingering concerns, don't sign up for the study. Get answers to those questions. If you're not happy with those answers, don't sign up for the study. I would also recommend that if you can make it a family affair, or include friends or fictive kin, if that's kind of where you are in your life, please involve as many people as possible, including your care provider, whether that's a doctor, a nurse practitioner, your local medical healer. whoever it is that you normally consult for care decisions, for clinical care decisions, they need to be the people that you're also talking to about clinical research. So you need to bring your people around you. Whoever it is that you normally talk to about this stuff, you should also be talking to them about clinical research participation. And again, ideally, everybody would be comfortable with it before you move forward. If not, then I would encourage you to have those questions answered, those concerns addressed. And again, I would strongly encourage you to make sure that everybody's on board, everybody knows what's going on before you sign that informed consent document.
Absolutely. Yeah. And before, when you were talking a little bit more about those community advisory boards or the IRBs, how can our audience or anybody interested learn about some of those opportunities to join?
Yeah, so usually these things are available online. If there is a particular research study that you're interested in, you can find out if it's going on by getting in contact with your local academic medical center. They usually have a website for human research protections or human subjects research. Sometimes you can just search for the name of the institution and then IRB to find out more about that. I think that the easiest way is to get in touch with the study team for the study that you're interested in being involved with. That clinical research coordinator, is somebody who is very, very well versed in not just the study that you're interested in, but also the broader structure. So they're going to know who the best contact is for that community advisory board. They're going to know the best contact for the institutional review board. So I would really recommend reaching out to that clinical research coordinator if you can't find anything online.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. We appreciate you providing a foundation of information about clinical research.
Thanks for having me.
We will open for more questions right after our panel discussion, so I encourage you to share any questions with us through the chat box or by emailing awareforall@sysgrip.org. We'll keep collecting questions as they come through. I'm excited to introduce you to Bashira with Salon Wellness, who will lead us in a Tai Chi exercise.
Hi, my name is Bashira Muhammad. I would like to talk to you today about the health benefits of Qigong. Qigong is an ancient Chinese holistic art. It helps to bring Qi, which is vital energy, within the body and around the body. Qigong is a gentle movement that helps move the blood and oxygen around the body, nourishing the tissues and the organs, promoting healing and wellness. Qigong helps to calm the mind, relieving emotional stress and mental anxiety. I'm asking you today to come and join Ken and I in our classes for Tai Chi and Qigong. Have a beautiful, loving, and bright day. So be it.
Good afternoon. Today we honor the ancient Chinese practice, wellness practice of Qigong. Qigong means energy work. We have Bashira here today that will show us in 5 minutes some really good energy exercises to boost your immune system, to help your outer self or your aura energy, so that things flow in the right direction. There's a few exercises for that, and of course the life force breath that we bring in. So let us start by stepping over on your left, inhaling through your nostrils and blowing out, taking your time as if you were blowing out a candle. And once again, don't unlock your knees. Go up and down with the breath. And once again. The next thing we want to do is just stop and feel the energy that you already manifested. So we're going to inhale through the nostrils and this time exhale through the nostrils. We're going to bring with the inhale our shoulders up towards the ears. Relax the neck, relax the back, relax the body. It's almost like a small bounce, up and down, very relaxing. Bashira seems like she's floating. One more and we stop. And release and sink the chi. This is recycling the earth energy, the chi energy, back to the earth. The next thing we want to do is smile. Bashira has a beautiful smile. And this signals to the body there is no threat. There's a calmness. There's a kindness. And we can relax. Let us take a breath as we go into 2 full moons. Beautiful. Taking your time. And once again, inhaling. And exhaling, releasing. And one more. And just relax for a moment. Open up your fingers and just feel that energy. Now, Master Wong sweeps the water. This helps to balance us. Turning the waist. This helps us in so many ways. The breath goes out, inhaling and releasing. Inhaling and releasing. Inhaling and releasing and sinking the chi. Hands overhead, touching heaven, coming down to the crown. 10 dragons run through forests. This is really good. This is really fun and it feels really good. And once again, overhead, touching heaven, come down to the crown, and the hands melt down the face. The heel of the hand goes around the eyes. There's no tool better than your own hand. There's nothing more better. And the bridge of your nose, beautiful. Go around in circles, your temples. Go to the center of your forehead and pull. Go around your jaws, your cheek, throat, and go under throat, bringing that energy down, bringing that wellness. And let's close overhead. And so it is. Thank you, Bashira. 5 minute energy work.
Thank you, Bashira. As we move on to our panel portion of the program, I want to remind everyone of our chat box feature. It's a great way to interact with our speakers and ask them any questions you may have about clinical research. Next, I would like to welcome our founder and board chair, Ken Getz, to introduce each of our panel speakers.
So I want to thank all of you for joining our panel discussion today. And I'd like to briefly introduce each of our panel members and then begin our discussion. Each panelist brings a unique perspective. Some are people who've participated in clinical trials as a study volunteer. Others are involved in conducting clinical trials. And our goal in this panel discussion is to share all of these different perspectives to help you be better educated and informed about the clinical research process. Our panelists today are Mary Reppert, a study volunteer, Ashley Culp, a study volunteer, Anthony Olsansky, a clinical research professional at a research center, Mira Harhe, a clinical research professional at a research center, Jamie Hood, who's a clinical research professional at a pharmaceutical company, and Andy Lee, also a clinical research professional at a pharmaceutical company. So let's begin our discussion, and I'll just ask each of you to help us understand your perspective and where you're coming from. Can you tell us briefly how each of you has been involved or is currently involved in a clinical trial or a clinical research activity? And Mary, perhaps you could kick us off.
I have to say right now, I'm not involved in any trials. None have been offered to me right now.
But have you participated in the past, Mary?
I did methotrexate versus placebo. I want to say maybe 2015. I had to come off at the very end, but I was near the end of the trial. I had a pretty bad GI bleed, and the docs took me off a lot of things, and then I got a deep vein thrombosis. So at that point, they took me off, but I think I had very little time left to do it.
So Mary, we'll come back to you to learn about your actual experience in a moment. But thank you for that. Mira, maybe we can come over to you and you can share a bit about your perspective, where you're coming from in terms of your involvement in clinical trials and clinical research.
Sure. Well, I am a transplant nephrologist, so a kidney disease specialist and an epidemiologist. And my research, which is funded by organizations including the National Institutes of Health and the National Science Foundation, and some private organizations, focuses on improving the health of people with kidney disease, which is a very common condition in the United States, but one with very low awareness of the condition. So we have a lot of people who have kidney disease and don't know it, and who end up in its most advanced and serious stages. And so there's a lot of work to be done. And I'm really inspired by the need for innovation, but also the need to have patients really participate in research. It's very important in kidney disease research, but I think in all research. And so the part of clinical research that I enjoy the most really is the part that allows me to interact with research participants, and hopefully they get as much out of the experience as we learn from them.
Great, thanks, Mira. Andy, can we ask you to share a little bit about your perspective, where you're coming from?
Yeah, Ken, when I started my career, I was interested in sports medicine and human performance and how to optimize that. And in that process, we're looking at a lot of effects of exercise on cardiovascular metabolism, on lipid metabolism, etc. And working in a chemical pathology department where we did the sports medicine, in addition to other things, I got involved with the clinical trials and the impact of, for example, estrogen on lipids and on calcium as a control mechanism for cardiac hypertension, for example, and treatments using calcium channel blockers. And with that, I got interested in the pharmaceutical industry and made that my career, where I've been for almost 30 years now. And my accent will tell you that I'm not American. I grew up in South Africa, but after a while, I'd done clinical trials in South Africa, and I was invited to the United States to sort of work and pioneer global clinical trials. So for the last 25 years, I've worked on running clinical trials in some shape or form, in an operational sense, in large biopharmaceutical companies and also in biotech companies. And the one thing I've learned is that the most important factor that determines the success of a clinical trial, apart from all the good clinical practice and the hygiene parts, is that you need volunteers who are motivated and understand what they're signing up for. So the informed consent process is something that's near and dear to my heart. And actually working in all therapeutics is important. There's some common principles. Is central to success of any trial is the patient. And so we've adopted much more patient-centric approaches in more recent years. Back to you, Ken.
Yes, that's such a valuable perspective. I know many in our panel share that view, and we're going to tease that out a little further in a moment. So thank you, Andy, for mentioning that. Jamie, let's bring you in now, and if you could share a bit about your background and your perspective, given your vantage point as someone involved in clinical trials.
So over the past 20 plus years, I've always been on the pharmaceutical side of clinical research. And in any of the roles that I have worked in, I've always ensured that the patient's voice is being heard in the design and the execution of the study. Because if we don't make our trials patient-centric, then we're not going to be successful in bringing a new medication to the market, which will eventually help treat the patients. So always ensure that our studies are set up in a way that's easy for the patients to participate in.
Great, thanks, Jamie. And Anthony, thank you for your patience. But let's now bring you in to share where you sit and how you interact and are involved in clinical research.
Well, thanks, Ken. Thanks for the opportunity to speak a little bit about this important topic. You know, when I began my career as a pharmacist before I was a doctor, I was really intrigued with how drugs worked and why they worked the way they did, and was very interested in trying to provide patients with not only the best medications, but the best medications for their disease. Since then, I've become a medical oncologist, so I treat patients with cancer. And through that career of mine, I've worked both in the academic setting as well as in the pharmaceutical setting, developing drugs. So I have a perspective from sort of both camps, if you will. And I've been leading what we call phase 1 drug development now for about 11 years, where we're taking these really new medical entities and putting them in patients who have relatively little hope left because they don't have any new therapies that are approved by the FDA. And, you know, having this advantage of being able to put in some new medications into patients with old problems and giving them some real hope is really the joy of my existence right now as a medical oncologist. I get to meet these wonderful people who still want to be, you know, living their lives and really enjoying their families and enjoying life. And we have that opportunity to provide for these patients. But I really want to sort of echo what a lot of my colleagues have said. It's this altruism, this desire for patients not only to treat their own malignancy, in my particular case, or the case of renal disease for Mira, right? But it's really to help other people too. And that's so critical to understand where these people are coming from.
It's great to hear this level of appreciation from all of you and recognition of the important role of the study volunteer and that all of you play. Each coming from a different place of involvement within clinical research. Mira, maybe we could move now to sort of a broader topic, and we'll open it up for discussion after your comments. But in your experience and based on your conversations with study volunteers and with patients who've considered participating in a study, what are some of the areas where you see some of the largest misconceptions about clinical research that we could try to address in our panel discussion today?
I think that, so clinical research is such a broad topic. It's such a broad word. So what patients need to understand, or I should say research participants, potential research participants should understand about what kind of study are they signing up for. Are they signing up for an observational study? Are they signing up for something with an intervention? What does blinding mean? What will they learn about their own, you know, if for example, a medical condition is found during, you know, when they're participating in research? How is it different being a research participant than being a patient? Because sometimes we use those terms interchangeably, but there are real differences and firewalls that are in place between a research team and a research participant as well, that are different between a doctor-patient relationship, for example. So I wouldn't say that there are kind of, you know, I wouldn't say I've come across broad misconceptions about research. I would say that more so that it's very important to really help a potential research participant identify what kind of study is this, what are the risks, what are the potential benefits. And so again, someone said the informed consent process earlier. It is the heart and soul of what we should be doing to protect research participants going through the process so that there are no misconceptions about what they're signing up for.
That's a perfect invitation, Andy, for you perhaps to comment further on your remarks regarding the critical role that the informed consent process plays.
Yeah, sure, Ken. So human subject protection and quality are the first tenets of the design of clinical trials. And, you know, we always think about how important those are. And when we talk about informed consent, you need to inform people about their disease, the disease options. And the consent is secondary to the information. So we need to give adequate time for them to understand the process, understand the procedures, understand the risk benefit as described. And this requires a dialogue back and forth, and it requires us sharing information in the language of the participant, which we'll get into later on, the different types of participants, in the same environment, a more relaxed environment, and allow people time to digest the information and often seek out more information about the trial and the treatments, fully know the side effects, fully know the procedures, and fully know the length of the commitment. You know, all too often it's very exciting in the beginning, but clinical trials are a long, arduous process. Many of them are like a marathon. You have to stay in the trial a long time, and particularly in oncology, the overall survival outcome is really important. In our vaccine studies we're talking about, and even these COVID studies, people are talking about accelerated approvals, but a typical vaccine safety analysis is at least 2 years long. So we need to consent people appropriately on the risks and the need to participate and be followed up for the outcome of the trial and the benefit of the entire study.
Thank you. Mary, can we bring you in now? And I just wanted to ask, think about your experience with the informed consent process, and did you feel that you learned a lot through that process, and did it answer a lot of the questions you had?
I did. I was, the nurses that put me in the study, first of all, I spoke to them socially. They would come in and see me when I went to visit the doctor, asked me if there was ever a study that came up, could they put me in? Of course, I said yes. They went in great detail in explaining what the study was for. So my family was hesitant. I wasn't hesitant. I felt safe doing it. And I can't remember if I ever found out if it was placebo or methotrexate. I just don't remember. But I felt very confident doing it. I'm listening to Mira talking about kidneys, and I know I have some decreased kidney function. And other than say, go to the doctors, no doctor has really said to me, well, they could do this for you. They're going to advise you on this. So, doctors have to learn to talk to patients a little bit better. The nurses do a great job, I think.
Thanks, Mary. Anthony, maybe we can bring you in now just to comment as well. And if you can add to the conversation along the lines of the initial question, are there some areas where you see that there is more confusion, or there are some misconceptions that we can particularly try to address here in our discussion?
Well, first, Ken, I want to digest what Mary just said, which is the doctors need to be a little bit more proactive here and explaining things to patients and making sure that we're listening, right? The first part of being a physician is listening to our patients and making sure we're tuned into them. But you bring up a good point, and I think that there are some misconceptions that typically fly around the clinic. A lot of patients come in and say, well, doc, I don't want to be a guinea pig. And I try to remind patients that, the animal science is important, but they're not animals. They're humans. They are really important to us. We share in what they are and who they are, and we recognize how precious life is. And we really want to make sure that their stance and what they want to do in life is really taken into account when we're talking about any kind of treatment that we're doing. That's really important. We're not treating them like animals. And as others have mentioned, safety is a priority for us. We're really trying to make sure that all patients who end up being subjects in research are looked at with a lot of care and compassion so that we're being safe first and foremost. I think it's also really important to people understand that they're volunteers. They're giving something to the community. They're giving of themselves. their time. They're often giving of their own family, right? And that's so important to recognize. When they sign an informed consent, they're really signing that just so that I can prove to the authorities that I've talked to them appropriately about the trial. And they shouldn't really sign that consent if they don't feel that they've been appropriately managed in that situation. But at the same time, they're always in charge of what's going on. And they're willing to pull out of research at any point. They're capable of pulling out of research at any point in time. Of course, it should engage in a discussion with the people who are taking care of them. But by all means, they need to recognize that they're volunteers first and foremost.
That's great. And Jamie, we'll circle now to you to sort of complete our discussion here. And I was wondering if you could comment a bit on some of the themes that have been brought up, including the importance of a partnership that really has to exist between the research professionals involved in clinical research and patients who choose to learn more and then want to consider participating. What are some of the ways that you have seen organizations looking to partner and to listen to the voice of the patient more extensively?
So, one thing that we always do is when we're starting a study, we talk to the sites and understand what their process is to talk to the patients about a clinical study. And when we're talking about our specific study, we ask them if there are specific tools that they think would be helpful for the sponsor to develop to help explain the study more to the patient when they're doing that consenting process. In the past, we've done videos for the patients to watch. We've created almost like a picture book to help explain some of the study visits, so the patients are very clear what's going to happen to them when they come in for their visits. So it's tools and aids to help expand on that consent conversation that the physician is having.
I want us to shift gears for a moment and mention that often at our AWARE events, we get a lot of study volunteers who are considering their very first clinical trial. And what I wanted to ask is if you have some words of advice for someone who's completely new to the process. All of you have had extensive experience, or you've been involved in a trial. But Mary, maybe I can put you on the spot as a start. What would you tell someone who's considering a trial for their very first time?
To explain all the risk, to explain how it would benefit people, what would be the benefit of doing the study. I was definitely advised I could stop at any time. I like what Jamie said about a picture book and maybe a video to do before you talk to the doctor or the nurse, so then you kind of know what questions you might want to ask, My nurses kept me very informed. They were just absolutely great.
I'll invite the rest of you. Any other thoughts on how we might communicate with someone who's really considering a trial for the first time? And perhaps we can also think about some of the new ways that clinical trials are being conducted at this time, where we're relying more on a remote or virtual, or we're relying more on telemedicine. Are there things that we can tell someone who's considering participating in a trial now?
Yeah, Ken, perhaps I'll raise my hand and attempt an answer at this. So I think there are 2 or 3 things that are really important to engage patients and what patients should consider. So the very first one is most patients, well, they're all volunteers. Some are ill and some are healthy volunteers, but the majority have something that is being treated or a new experimental agent that's being tested to treat their ailment or illness. And in that regard, the sort of primary thing is to look at mechanisms of action, the potential benefit, all of these things, and these potential side effects. So the initial part is a medical discussion and a medical understanding. It then sort of peels to a next layer of the onion, and that is sort of the logistical components of this is how frequently do I have to visit? What is required at a visit? Do I have to go into a hospital? Is there parking? Will I be able to have a meal there? Can I do all the things I want to do? If I've got an X-hour infusion, can I read a book? Can I connect to the internet? Is there Wi-Fi? So a lot is around the logistics and the participation. And then there are other things about a next layer, maybe, you know, would I be reimbursed for certain things that may be out-of-pocket expenses, and reassure people that we would true up for things like transport and meals and things like that. And then the last thing is the impact on the family members. Is, you know, in certain diseases like Alzheimer's, you don't sign up one person, you sign up the person with the disease and you sign up the caregiver as well. And so I think it's important for them to have the discussion with their families and what's required and what support they will need during a clinical trial. It's a deep commitment, and it starts off with the medical stuff, then the logistics, and then, you know, some of the financial logistics, and then the support infrastructure. So I ask people to really consider those things. And once you've got the answers to those types of questions, I think you're fully informed then to actually make a rational decision, so that one of those other layers doesn't trump the medical expertise that's going on. All too often we have people very keen to be in the medical experiment, but logistically it's overburdensome for them. So that's my advice to patients, is trying to tease out all of those aspects.
Thank you, Annie. That is so helpful. And I would now open it up to the rest of you, where there's some of the points that Andy emphasized resonating with you as areas that, that you agree would be really important to emphasize in your conversation with someone considering a clinical trial.
I think a lot of the points that Andy brought up were really about the informed consent, right? The kind of stuff that as a physician, I'm supposed to disclose to patients so that they do understand. And they need to realize that they're going to be seeing a team typically, not only just myself, but also nurses who are going to come in, research coordinators that are coming in. And the most important way for them to get informed about anything is to ask questions. Oftentimes people need to hear the same thing more than once to really get a good sense of what's happening. And I think that also brings into a suggestion that family members, as Andy had said, are really part of the process here, but they're also part of the listening, right? They can also be educated and really help patients make informed decisions about whether or not they want to participate. There is a big commitment to these trials when you do volunteer. We're always hopeful that we're going to be providing a benefit, but you really need to listen carefully to what the physician is saying. I can't always promise that my patients are going to be benefiting from their therapy. It's always my hope, but not always my promise. So we also need to focus very carefully on what side effects or what risks a therapy might have. But I think that, you know, all of those points that we heard from Mary and Andy are really valid.
Yeah, I think so too. Mary, you had raised your hand. Did you have a comment you wanted to make?
Well, my doctor's office was in downtown Philadelphia, so it was quite expensive to park. So I did have reimbursement for parking, which was nice, you know. Now I'm just on Social Security and my husband has a pension. You know, it's not a lot of money like what I made as a nurse. So, you know, I would have joined the study anyhow, but that definitely was a benefit because I believe I had to go every couple of weeks and get blood taken, you know. And my grandkids were younger, I could bring them with me. Now with school, it's different, which as you talk about logistics, that would kind of put me in a bind a little, you know. But yeah, there are things that make it easier for patients, make it more, not as hard, you know. So anyhow, I just thought that was good points.
Yeah, and I just to echo what Andy had said, you know, often we see patients first looking at the risk that is related to the science behind the research, but a lot of the logistics and the convenience factors are important considerations. And many of you have echoed how critical it is that you really think through and understand what's expected of you as a volunteer in the study. And you have to think through what burden or what kind of commitment that represents and whether you're able to meet that commitment. Mira, it looked like you had something you wanted to add.
I think I was just nodding in animated agreement mostly. I think that one of the things that's really important for us to acknowledge is that people learn differently. It's a theme that's come up, and I was just thinking about it. Things like being able to, for a new potential participant in a research project, to know to say, I don't understand this. Sometimes people feel ashamed to say that, or patients can have different levels of literacy, or even just health literacy. We throw around big words a lot. And it is very important to create enough trust to be able to have that person who's interested in participating in research be able to tell you, I don't understand this. Can you explain it to me a different way? And so creating an environment on my side as a person who's actually designing and recruiting people to participate in research, it's always in my mind, am I creating an environment that feels safe to be able for someone to be able to tell me that? And then do I have other ways to teach this information and have it be a discussion for someone who learns a different way? So I thought, others have said that, some version of that, and I think it's so important.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Yes, let's invite Ashley in and welcome to our discussion. Your timing is perfect, and we're glad you joined us. We're talking about participation in a trial and some lessons, some insights, some important considerations. And maybe you can kick us off for this next question, and then we'll open it up to the rest of the group. But it really relates to a comment that Andy had made really at the outset. You used the word arduous to describe sort of the journey, the long commitment, the time to be in a clinical trial, that it can drag on, it can take a long time, and we shouldn't forget that. So I wanted to ask if you could comment on any tips or pointers for people who've been in a trial for a long time. What are some of the challenges that might make it hard to stay in a clinical trial? And what are some insights we can offer people who are thinking through those kinds of issues?
Well, my experience is a little different than you can't really label any kind of trial typical, of course, because they all vary depending on what's involved. But when I joined mine, it was very different because it wasn't for my cancer type. It was for the mutation, since it was a targeted treatment trial. And originally, it was an every month visit. And of course, I'm in Pennsylvania. The trial's in Boston. So I knew every time I'd have to come to Boston, I'd travel for anywhere between 2 and 5 days, depending on what was involved. Initially, starting off in a trial, there's lots of tests you have to have done. You have to make sure you're a candidate and you're eligible for it. So initially, when I began the trial, it was a few-week process, just because they want to make sure all your blood markers are good, especially if you just came off chemo. There's a lot of factors that play into that. So the first initial week or so of being in the trial, it was mostly just testing. And then I came back the following, I think it was 2 weeks later, and that's when I actually began the dose of the medicine. And that started in 2016. So from 2016 up until now, I've been in the trial monthly. Of course, with COVID, it's been virtual, and I'm kind of an easy patient now. So things have been, I only have to go every so often, which has been great. But originally, for the last, almost 4 years now, I've been coming every single month. And that's why I found Elastic's Foundation. They're wonderful, because I knew between my husband's work schedule, and then I had a newborn at the time. I think he was almost 2 when I was initially started the trial. So I had to have childcare because I couldn't take him with me all the time. So it was really hard to manage that part of it, the time that's taken away from, my normal life. And so, initially, like I said, it was more time involved, but then as things kind of got a routine and, all the scheduling conflicts got resolved, I kind of knew exactly when I was going every single month. And I knew where my scans were too, because it was a quarterly scans, basically.
Ashley, thinking about someone who's perhaps been in a trial, they just started their trial and they're starting now to look at the schedule. Do you have any advice for someone who's starting to feel the burden of now having been in a trial for a while? What are thoughts on what they should think about to keep them committed to the study?
So based on a kind of just backstory on my situation, so the kind of cancer I had, it was very rare. 100 women a year got it. And because of that, I found a group when I was initially diagnosed in 2014 that was kind of they were my backbone to it, because they were the people who knew this cancer and they knew exactly what I was going through. So I formed a kind of an alliance with these members. And a lot of the girls also were faced with, I've ran out of options, I've got to start a trial. And a lot of them did not, simply because of all of these different concerns. And my first concern was financially. You know, I don't think it's very well known when someone takes a clinical trial, they're not like, oh, my insurance is going to cover it. Is this going to be out of pocket for me? And right away, some people just give up without, you know, looking further into it. And then, of course, travel. That's expensive, knowing they're going to stay away. And another thing I've noticed with some of the women in my group that have considered trials is they immediately write it off, because these are all things that are not well known. All these different available resources to them are not well known. And I believe, you know, if you're coming across a trial and you know, this is a better option than what I've been given. Chemo is something I've already done. I don't feel really good about it. Maybe it didn't work the first time. I want to try something else out. It's very important to contact the trial coordinator and find out ahead of time, what things can you guys provide to me that'll ease that burden for me? Either it's financially or, you know, traveling, any kind of care, because there's so many, and even staying. Like originally when I started, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to pay for all these hotels. And then I found out they had so many different programs, whether it was me staying with a family that just was donating a room to me, or if it was lodging that was within the hospital system. So those three things I think are automatically something that a patient thinks of. As far as, let's see, travel, finances, as far as like the insurance part of thing, because sometimes people think, okay, I have to pay out of pocket for this. Especially if it's out of state. Of course, that's something that they should also have someone within the trial program, you know, check their eligibility and what's covered, because, and even the Compassionate Care Act, I don't think a lot of people are familiar with that either. So that's a really good resource. It's almost like, let's give a checklist to all of these people who are contact the trial and find out, okay, I'm interested in this. What do I need to know? And almost like, okay, well, here's a checklist of what's involved. Here's resources, so that you don't automatically doubt this trial and, you know, give up on even pursuing it.
So Ashley, this has been really helpful, and it's in many ways echoed some other comments folks have made on in the panel. It's very, very consistent and very, very useful information. Let's draw in a few of the other panel members now. And Anthony, I wonder if I can sort of call you out and just, if you could add to what Ashley has just described, thinking about some of your patients who've been in trials that have lasted for a long time. Are there particular areas that you really try to emphasize to help them stay committed and to help them understand the importance of staying in the trial if it's appropriate for them?
Well, Ken, I think, you know, one of the things we do is try to provide patients with all kinds of resources to try to make that feasible. We try to provide the patient with resources as well as their family members, because after all, a person can't benefit from a clinical trial unless they're actually staying in it. In cancer care, oftentimes, as we're dealing with patients, they want to stay in the trial because of what it can mean for their life. But at the same time, these resources and the strain on their family can really get into the way. So I think that providing these people with as many resources as possible is a great start. I think it's also important, as Ashley had mentioned, that a lot of the upfront discipline that you need to have comes early on in the trial. And then after a few months, typically a lot of the scientific stuff that we need so desperately to try to research sort of goes away. It doesn't become less important, but it's not quite as noticeable to the participant and not so time consuming. So I think those are really two very, very important points to understand. And staying in a trial long term to try to reap those benefits is really well worth it in the end.
Andy, I noticed your head nodding, so I'll just sort of call you in a bit just to weigh in here. I think in particular, Anthony's comment about the importance of staying in the trial, because that's really the best way that we can learn about the effects of an investigational treatment and can learn more about the outcome of the study. So if I could just sort of ask you to comment on that and build on that comment.
Yeah, sure. Great comments by both of my colleagues here. And Ashley, thanks so much for sharing your story on trial participation. I think I agree totally that the initial burden is in the first 3 to 6 months, and that's where a lot of the dose titration, toleration, effect or side effect is seen with most of the therapies. And then long-term maintenance is a slightly different story. Typically by that time, you've seen a certain proportion of patients go into some sort of remission and get onto sort of stable therapy. Once you're into that sort of stable part of the trial and you've sort of got yourself into more steady state, the types of visits are less frequent and they're often less intense and they're more sort of symptom driven. So if you develop certain symptoms, you would invoke certain testing to be done. And what this leads us to is in the long-term follow-up, particularly in cancer trials, but also in other therapies, is that you now lend yourself to an approach that says you could decentralize some of this stuff. You could do a lab draw at a hospital or clinic in Pennsylvania, not have to go to Boston. There is a time where you could perhaps get imaging done remotely, although my experience in some of the cancer institutes is some of the patients have their favorite scanners. They like to go back to the same machine because especially if it's shown that they've had shrinkage, that they believe that's their lucky machine and they don't want to tempt fate with a different machine. So there are nuances of people who really like to go to site and they enjoy going, believe it or not. But later in studies, it does lend itself to some different approaches where one can practice sort of telemedicine, check in less frequently and do some of the remote collection of data with the idea that if there's something going wrong, they can get access to the site very quickly.
Actually, Ray, you raised a really good point also about during the pandemic, how has trial participation changed for many people? And I want to use that as a transition for us in our discussion. We've been getting a lot of comments and questions from registrants in this AWARE meeting. And one of the areas of greatest interest to people is just understanding how should they think about clinical trial participation during COVID-19, during the pandemic. So I'm wondering, maybe Jamie, if you can kick us off, how have you seen trials change during the pandemic, and just to really help inform people about ways that trials are different right now?
Yep. So what we've done at our organization is, first of all, doing direct drug shipment to the patients. They don't have to go to the clinic to obtain their study medications. We've also started to do home health visits. So we are working with nurses who follow very strict COVID policies and regulations, and they're going to the patient sites to draw bloods, look at if they have any side effects going on, what medications they're doing. So we're shifting right now the way we're designing and implementing our clinical trials to make them more decentralized, which makes it a little easier for the patients. It reduces their risk of going into a hospital or clinic and being exposed to COVID. So those are the two key areas that we're working on right now.
And Mira, can I invite you in? How are you seeing trials change? Obviously, Jamie brought up some, and I know we've also heard a number of people talk about more telemedicine visits as well. What are you seeing?
Well, so, we've had to transform some of the work that we intended to be in person when feasible to be either by video conferencing or by phone. And some things are very possible to be done that way. I mean, when you really when you think creatively, a lot of what we can do, we can bring it to the research participant in some way, some of the ways that were already suggested, and we can be more creative going forward. I think that some of the challenges about certain studies where you simply cannot not have contact with the research participant, and certainly in the beginning of the pandemic, certain things were just shut down. Research institutions have shut down research activities just for safety for their staff, and partnering with certain organizations. If you're trying to go to the patient, for example, the research participant in their clinical setting, shut down research encounters in person for safety. As we learn more, I think things will continue to change. It's dynamic. What we understand about how to engage in a safe way. And so I think, again, it's about creative redesign in some cases, and also acknowledging that when the pandemic, when you're in a hot zone and things are more acute, that certain things are not possible, and that research teams should be informing participants about abrupt changes in the protocol, or having to postpone things or stop things entirely in a really timely way. But that I think research participants need to know about those kinds of things can happen, or more likely to happen now. Things that are in person now might have to change, and how can we not just inform the participants but learn how to be innovative going forward. I think it creates many challenges and opportunities.
Great. Andy, over to you, and then maybe I can invite Ashley and Mary to comment as well.
Yeah, that's great. We've seen, I work at a large company, we prosecute about 300 clinical trials ongoing right now. And we've seen a complete varied impact on the impact of COVID on our trial environment. So we have not paused or stopped any study at any site. And what we've looked at is local conditions. We believe that no patient should be left behind, and we're open for business and will support every site in the most appropriate way. So having looked at some of our studies in phase 1 cancer, we've seen this go forward unabated. We've seen globally that in areas where they're highly impacted by COVID, the phase 1 units are open, because this is where patients do not have new therapies available. So we just admire that they've been able to isolate, firewall, and continue to do phase 1 oncology work. In our HIV programs, we have actually accelerated recruitment, and we've had faster than expected recruitment ahead of our schedules. Most remarkable. In other areas, it's highly varied. And the one area we have a product, letermovir, which is a product to prevent cytomegalovirus. And one of the studies we're looking at is in solid organ transplant, particularly kidney transplant. So I'll go back to Myra on this one to invite her back in. But we've seen that in elective surgeries and some of the kidney transplant operations, that those have declined somewhat. And we've also seen those studies slow down. And that is not because necessarily of volunteers, it's the hospital environment in which people are working. And then respiratory studies, our investigators are pulled into managing COVID. So they really don't have the time and the resources in their hospital to do the more respiratory oriented studies that we have. Some of those may be antibacterials for hospitalized, hospital acquired bacterial pneumonias, etc. So recruitment into those types of studies is obviously impacted. So we've seen a mixed bag of this. And by and large, we've seen some just lose about 10% of the rate. Others are on target or ahead. And a few have been quite impacted, particularly those where the sites just really don't have the capability to take on new patients, but would rather manage the existing patients. But my credit goes out to every one of the sites we work with around the world. They've just done an amazing job to focus on patients. It's just incredible.
And even for those sites that saw a temporary halting of some of their trials, Many of them are now back up and running, and they're quite resilient. So it is quite remarkable how well the community of investigative sites have responded. Ashley, you mentioned that you are in a trial now. Mary, I know your trial has ended. Can you talk, Ashley, about once the pandemic was in full force, did you hear from your site, and did they make adjustments to your participation?
Yes, and previous to COVID, I had requested maybe we can be a little bit more lenient with my trial, just because I had been on it for so long, and the trial itself actually wasn't it wasn't in effect anymore. They actually changed the drug. Previously the sponsor had a lot of, rigid outlines where you couldn't do that type of thing. But when this occurred, frantically, my oncology team, they were kind of running around with their head cut off, not knowing how to handle it. But like you said, with their resilience, it was amazing how well they coordinated and organized it so quickly. So the way they did it was, obviously they're gonna not allow me to come for on-site visits, but they mail me the drug with a special medical transportation company. And basically you just have a Zoom call with my oncologist, and I do my labs locally. So that's been really great too, of my choice. And then I just go over the results with my oncologist. And then I do, like I said, I've come up there every 3 months for my scans. So it's been actually pretty great. Yeah, and they seem to have it down now. They seem to have a really good system in place. And speaking to my oncologist, he said, this really opens the window for a lot of opportunities in the future. This is great. They weren't prepared for this, but at least now they kind of have an idea if we were to do this to make it easier for patients, we have a starting point on how to, proceed for the future.
That's great. Anthony, you were going to comment on this as well?
Yeah, I think, a lot of good points have been really brought up, but I think that it would be sort of important for us to point out that this is not just about the physicians or the sponsors or even the patients, but really the Food and Drug Administration has come to bat as well in this pandemic, and making us understand that we can be a little bit more lenient. So we often are attributing the success we've had in the pandemic to the FDA and some of the rules and regulations that they've been allowed us to bend, and working with sponsors that they've allowed us to bend the rules and regulations. And then, of course, also with our institutional review boards or our IRBs or ethic committees, to making sure that we keep the patient here first and foremost. Yeah, drug research is important, but it's not going to trump the card of what the patients actually bring to the table. They're by far and away our most valuable resource, and that's what we really need to keep in mind.
That's great. This next question I want to ask all of you is maybe difficult for us to answer. I'm sort of throwing that out there as an opener, but it's actually one of the more popular questions that we've gotten from registrants this time. And the question is basically, I would like to help clinical research advance during the pandemic. Should I consider volunteering for a COVID clinical trial? And what are some of the risks that I really have to be thinking about here? So perhaps I can turn that to our medical professionals as a start, and then maybe we can turn to some of our study volunteers on the panel as well. What are things that people should think about if they feel that this is an important way to help during the pandemic?
Well, I'll start and say,
thank you.
Thanks for thinking about this, right? That's the very first step, is to think about wanting to offer yourself up for clinical research and really be part of the solution here so that we can get rid of this pandemic. That's first and foremost in everybody's mind, of course. As we've talked about a lot during this thing, it's really about asking questions. So that might be asking questions first to your family. What do you think about me being a participant in this important research? And then when you've come to a sort of a decision that would be reasonable for you to approach, then go to a site that's doing coronavirus research and ask what kind of trials are available. There's not just one trial, right? There's many trials, and each trial is going to represent different possible risks. Some of these are going to be for patients who have never experienced coronavirus. Others are going to be with patients who actually have active infections, and others are going to be with patients who have had infections, but now don't have any symptoms. So there's going to be a lot of sort of discussions that need to be made. I think first and foremost, again, is when you made the decision to consider it, we're going to offer you a big thank you for even taking that first step. But then talk to your family and then go ahead and research what kind of trials might be most applicable for you.
It's very helpful, Anthony. Mira, can I pull you in? Do you have any other thoughts to add?
I agree that it's incredibly humbling that people put themselves in the position to take on some risk to help either, society, to help people with their condition. And in the case of anyone who's volunteering to take part in COVID-19 related research, I feel the same way. I just think that they are heroic in their own right. So to those asking that question, thank you also from me. And I agree. I think that there are so many different types of trials that are out there that carry different risks and have different goals. So am I participating in a trial to understand the safety of a drug? Am I participating in a trial to understand how well it works or what dose should be taken? So there are so many types of questions to ask about a study, and so that you can really think about, okay, what am I taking on by participating? And we've touched on a lot of other things just about, what's my involvement going to be like? What is this commitment? But it's in some ways not so different from all the other trials that we've been talking about. It's a volunteer effort that is incredibly noble and for the greater good. And also it's very important to understand the risks. And so I would just say to know if you learn a certain way or need to understand things better, to ask questions, and never be afraid to ask for something to be described a different way. But I just think it's really important that people participate when they can. It's empowering too.
Ashley, can I ask your thoughts?
I mean, immediately, personally, I feel as if, okay, what have you done already? What does the data show already? I think there needs to be a very open conversation about how the drug is being tested and the side effects of it, but it needs to be provided publicly, so that, if anybody, for example, hears the trial, immediately they can go online, maybe to, the CDC website or wherever, or the trial, clinicaltrials.gov, and find immediately, previous results on it, even though, the trial hasn't been closed or, published the results per se. But, like Nira said, just providing the questions, or providing the answers to the questions, making it appealable in a way, it's kind of scary. We're in a scary time right now. And, personally, if I see that, I'm going to think, oh God, this is brand new. Why would I want to do this? But at the same time, personally, you could have a relative that experienced this. So you want to be part of the greater good of rectifying this. But there needs to be a lot more positive conversation around it.
And I think all of you are really speaking to one of the most important aspects of participation, which is that you need to really be as informed as possible. And as we say at SysGrip, one of our major mantras is education before participation. Clearly you have to feel that you're getting the information you need to some of the points that were made. If it's not expressed in a way that you understand, you have to ask questions. You have to weigh different elements to make a decision, but it's a very active process. And you have a lot of people involved who can really help inform you as well. I realize we're moving through time so quickly. This has been a really great discussion, but I wanted to just get to a few other questions that have been posed. And here's one. They ask, we've been hearing a lot about the importance of diversity in healthcare and clinical trials. When you develop a protocol and conduct a clinical trial, what are some of the ways that you can ensure that a diverse study volunteer population is represented in the trial? And maybe, Jamie, I can put you on the spot first to kick off our answer to that question.
So this is a great question. I think what we're trying to do now is to build into our study design a goal of what we want to set to ensure that we're enrolling a diverse population into our clinical studies. We're also looking at our protocol templates and to ensure that's being thought of when the study team is creating those protocols, that they are including everyone into a study. And I think as we continue to grow and evolve through this, more and more will come out on how sponsors are changing their ways to ensure diversity is being fully included into the clinical studies being developed.
Can I ask our colleagues within research centers, Mira and Anthony, could you comment on some of the ways that you're trying to reach a diverse community of potential study volunteers?
I mean, I will just say that kidney disease disproportionately impacts people of color. And there is an absolute need, and the outcomes are worse in communities of color with kidney disease. So it's an urgent situation that we are focused on diversity in research and in research participation. It's an urgent issue in my field, something that we're taking head on, and I'd say there are a lot of people who have been advocating for this for a long time. I believe in diversity on the research team. So having a team that incorporates people of different perspectives and backgrounds is really helpful. So you have automatically ideas about, where are my blind spots when I'm designing this, and where can I go to incorporate the most diverse research participant population. I think it starts at home in building your team. And then beyond that, I think engaging communities or getting into the communities that you hope to impact with this research in meaningful ways is really important. Engaging community organizations and thinking about things like, when we talk about telehealth even, making a research protocol kind of revolve around access to the internet is going to be a problem, right? Because a whole group of people are not going to have those resources, are not going to be able to participate, or not providing reimbursement for transportation or for time. I think there are very thoughtful things that are already done, and probably lots of ways we can improve this, but it's very much on the forefront of my mind in my field. It matters so much.
Ken, I'd like to echo a lot of those thoughts. I think it's important to recognize that, at least in cancer care, the National Cancer Institute, the NCI, has often felt that this was a really important goal to try to enroll patients of diverse backgrounds, because we recognize that not all patient groups respond the same way to the same drugs, right? We have different side effects, we have different efficacy or effectiveness measures, so that's really important. I think on the ground, when we're actually talking to patients, we also have to recognize that patients are coming from different family backgrounds, different ethnic backgrounds, different belief systems. And so we really bring in a fairly large team so that we can more effectively engage these people and talk to them really coming from the same place that they're coming from. So that, if they're very ethnically focused and they have some ideas about how research should be engaged, we engage them on that level. If they have a religious background and they want to talk a little bit about that, we can engage them on that background. I think it's important for people to recognize that we're willing to be there with them and hold them by the hand as they take their first steps into research. That's really important to know.
Yes, Andy, you've got the closing comment.
Well, Ken, I think most multinationals operate in many countries. We operate in 60, and when we look at diseases we study, if you look at hepatitis C, pick your genotype and you have to go to a different geography. When you look at things like gastrointestinal, nasopharyngeal, esophageal cancers, much higher prevalence in Asia. We recruit much better there. Ebola, we did in Ebola-infected areas. Dengue, you do in dengue areas. But let's say all things being equal, let's talk about the United States. We have not historically, as sponsors, done a great job in looking at underrepresented organizations until recently. And there's some great case studies now. I mentioned earlier we'd recruited our HIV studies ahead of schedule in the pandemic crisis. In those programs, we said a priori we would want to increase participation of African Americans in HIV programs and also females. Females are underrepresented in those, as are LGBTQIA plus populations. And we've been able to, I don't want to use the word target, but identify and establish relationships with those communities, brought them in to help in the design, in the operational execution, in the materials that need to be prepared, in the language that's used, getting community representatives to help us. And I'm very pleased to report in those types of studies where we've put tremendous effort in, we have seen the highest participation ever of African Americans in these studies. We've seen approximately 30% female participation, which is unprecedented in these trials. And we're starting to use new tools and new relationship building. And the new tools are geomapping, where we can look at the disease incidence and we can map it out. And then we can start investing in training for clinical trial sites, investing in those communities, and building the right communication pathways, and most importantly, to build trust. Without trust, you can do everything else, but if there's no trust, it doesn't work. We've done some great things in prostate cancer, working with Yale University, reaching out to communities and the sort of church communities. These have been really, really productive for us. And it's the tip of the iceberg, but it's a start, Ken, and it's only going to get better from here. And it's not just the African Americans, it's the Latinx population, and it's others as well that are underrepresented in trials. We have a large Indian population in this country, and we have a burgeoning Asian population as well. And the agency would like to know how our drugs respond in these patients. Do they need the same dose, and what are the side effects? So we're working very hard on that, as too is the rest of the industry. And there are a lot of planned consortia and meetings that are going to take place in the near future.
Well, I want to thank all of you for a really informative and lively discussion, lots of really great insights. And I know on behalf of SysGrip, on behalf of our audience at the AWARE event, I want to thank all of you for joining us on the panel today. And I again, just really appreciate all of your comments and your really thoughtful insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
So much, everyone. Thank you again to all of our speakers today for volunteering their time. This has been very informative, and we really appreciate all that you do to improve public health. And thank you to all who submitted questions through our chat box. Please be sure to check our FAQ section linked below the media player for more information. I'm eager to introduce you to Kenneth with Salon Wellness, who will lead us in a mindful meditation exercise.
Hello, my name is Kenneth White, and I'm a Tai Chi, Qi Gong, chair yoga, Reiki practitioner, and instructor. I have classes on Zoom, but my first love is and has always been guided imagery meditation. And the guided imagery meditation can help lead you to your profound purpose. It helps to release the mind, relax the body, and rejuvenate the spirit. I call this GRACE. And GRACE is an acronym for grounding, releasing, alignment, calmness, energy, essence. And this is who we are when we are not functioning from a place of stress. Welcome. Thank you. Or should I say wellness come? Let us take a deep breath in and release as if you were blowing out a candle. And once again, let's take a deep breath in through our nostrils and blow out as if you were blowing out a candle. Let's bring a smile to your face, and if you can't to your face, let's bring a smile to your heart. This sends messages to the body that we are relaxed and we are not threatened. Let us take a breath and release anything that you might be holding on to, you might be carrying, you might have buried long ago. Relax your shoulders and relax your chin. You can see yourself, you can sense yourself, and you can feel yourself on a hill. A beautiful fall afternoon. You can see the sky and the beautiful clouds and all of the funny shapes. You look to your right and you see a path. And you know this path is right for you. Let us take a breath. Let us release anything we need to release. As we walk towards the path, we come to a canopy of trees and we go under. We can feel the coolness. We can feel the earth underfoot. We can hear the birds and the beautiful earth songs, butterflies at play. And let us take a breath. As we walk a little farther, we see rabbits dashing back and forth, squirrels preparing for their winter's nap, and let us take a breath. You look down and you see pebbles, round, beautiful, and you pick 2 up, and you keep walking. You feel the pebbles in your hand, the roundness, the smoothness, and you can feel, you can sense a mist in the air. As you walk a little farther, you come to a pool of water, and it is beautiful. You stand here, and you take one of the pebbles, and you cast them into the pool. This creates a ripple, and this ripple is the butterfly effect, creating your intentions, manifesting your wellness throughout the timeless dimensions of the universe. Let us take a breath. With intentions, we cast the other one for wellness, for balance, for well-being. Let us take a breath. The earth needs your kindness more now, your awareness, and the brilliance of your being now more than ever. Let us wake up and celebrate the brilliance of our being. And so it is.
Thank you, Kenneth. That was very relaxing and a nice way to practice mindfulness. I would like to thank each of you for joining us at our second ever virtual Aware for All event. Our aim was to help each of you become more informed about the clinical research process, where to go for more information, and what it's like to be a volunteer in the clinical research study, and the many professionals right here in the community who can assist you in learning about clinical research participation. We hope this is just the start of the conversation. There are a number of resources for you to refer to and continue your learning, starting with your handbook, as well as our resource center on our website. Be sure to check out our virtual exhibit hall where you can explore booths from local organizations and supporters. You can access the virtual health fair by clicking on the image below the media player, or by clicking on the link in the resource list. All of our event materials can be found at awareforall.org. They can serve as a guide with information about clinical trials here in Philadelphia, as well as information about clinical research participation. We also plan to follow up with you after today's event with a survey. We'd really appreciate if you could share your feedback with us as we continue to enhance our virtual version of the Aware for All program. I'd like to take a moment to recognize the medical heroes here in the audience tonight. Thank you for helping to find a better way to diagnose, prevent, and treat disease that helps improve public health and advance medical science. We hope you feel recognized as a valuable partner in this process. Without you, we would not be able to conduct new research and discover new cures and treatments. We are grateful for your gift of participation. Earlier this evening, we mentioned that the polls would double as your raffle tickets. We have a number of wonderful prizes donating to us from local supporters. We'll be contacting your winners directly, so please be sure to check your emails at the close of this program. Many of you were also members of our first 50 to register for this event. Please be sure to check your emails after the close of the program for information on how to collect the gift card. Thank you all again for joining us this evening for our clinical research education program, and we hope to connect with you at future Aware for All events. We can't wait to hear your thoughts about the virtual exhibit hall and webinar in our follow-up survey. We will also follow up post-event with all of the links included here in the webinar so that you can continue to visit the health fair and view the handbook resources at your convenience. We look forward to keeping in touch, and have a great night, everybody.